Russian missiles rained down on Ukraine today, killing at least 33 people, injuring 150 more. The missiles striking a large children's hospital in Kyiv, where people were trapped inside. First responders and civilians working to clear the debris, searching for survivors and victims. Ukraine's President Zelensky is demanding that Russia be held accountable for, quote, its acts of terror. This, as Ukraine, of course, is going to be at the top of the agenda for world leaders gathering here in Washington tomorrow for the NATO summit, the 75th anniversary of the Defense Alliance. President Biden is hosting the summit, of course, facing a number of challenges, strengthening the alliance's support for Ukraine, both during the war and after the war, and reassuring allies about his own ability at a time when most of them were already nervous about American leadership if Donald Trump were to be elected. Joining us now, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired Admiral James Stavridis, and New York Times diplomatic correspondent Michael Crowley. Welcome both. Admiral, first to you. We see the video coming out of Kyiv. It is heartbreaking. It's a war crime. I mean, it's horrendous. The latest Russian missile strike hitting a children's hospital, not just a civilian area, but a children's hospital. So this is going to be part of the discussion. NATO has stepped up. Europe has stepped up. Now the U.S. belatedly has stepped up. But they want to look forward. They want to look towards, getting those weapons online, training, long-range issues, as well as reconstruction and post-war.
You're right to draw a line under the video we just saw. They ought to be running that on loop for all those heads of state and government. There'll be 40 different leaders. They ought to be running that on loop because that's what we are standing against. That is a war crime of a vicious and obvious nature. So job one, you're right, will continue to be how the alliance can stand strongly behind Ukraine. And one thing I think you'll see, a practical thing, the alliance will send a permanent representative forward to Kyiv to coordinate NATO aid, military, and above all, the implementation of using these F-16s, which are going to come online, the fighter aircraft that are being supplied from across the alliance. So there's enormous work to do, but clearly the alliance will be doing all it can to signal real resolve in the face of this kind of Russian barbarity now extending into its third year.
I want to get Michael into this as well, but let me just ask you, if they had more air defense, if they had more Patriots online, and I know the U.S. is short of Patriots, they've been scouring the world, getting them sent from other countries, parts here and parts there, but is there any way that they could have defended against this?
If we had early on gotten the F-16 aircraft in the hands of the Ukrainians, they could have been there as early as a year ago, by my estimate. If we had committed at the beginning, yes, Patriots, very helpful. Those are being sourced from around the world. I think you'll see 7 to 10 new batteries landing soon. All of that will contribute to what President Zelensky has consistently said, which is help us close the skies. Help us close the skies over Ukraine. Let's hope the alliance adds to that and also provides more offensive capability to the Ukrainians, not only the F-16s, but also ATACMS, long-range cruise missiles, unleashing those against Russian targets. I think all of that makes sense at this point.
Michael Crowley, we've talked about this, you and I, for so many, for years now. But Zelensky keeps coming to Munich, to the security conference, asking for help, saying that he needs air defense. And we see this happening. This could also be a signal to NATO as it's gathering, because they're talking about NATO membership down the road, a path to that. They're talking about a lot of things to help Zelensky against several NATO members who are getting tired of the war and are pressing for some accommodation.
Yeah, that's right, Andrea. And the goal of this summit is going to be to project unity, to say that we're standing together as an alliance and we are in it for the long haul against Russia. Of course, there are important divisions beneath the surface, including what to do about this strong desire that Zelensky and the Ukrainians have for full NATO membership, something that they're not going to get out of this summit. There's going to be some language addressing, what that process will look like over time. But, few, certainly nowhere near a majority of the members are ready for that step now. And this summit will also be very forward-looking in the sense of so much uncertainty about politics in the United States and in Europe. Will Donald Trump return to the White House as president of the United States? Will right-wing forces that are skeptical of NATO and confrontation with Russia continue to rise in Europe, although there was a setback for the right in France? So that will be another big part of this summit, is trying to show that NATO can carry on.
Well, and that's exactly the right setup. We didn't work this out, but this was Joe Biden on Morning Joe talking about NATO and certainly alluding to the possibility of a Trump presidency. Let's watch.
And by the way, I'm going to have all these foreign leaders here. I've been in contact with the new British Prime Minister, anyway. Look, the country, the rest of the world is looking, our allies are looking for U.S. leadership. Who else do you think could step in here and do this? I expanded NATO. I solidified NATO.
And the contrast is quite obvious, Admiral. NATO members really want to talk. When I talk to European leaders, they want to talk about Trump-proofing NATO against a Trump presidency. They're so nervous about it. This is a big test for the president, but he can handle summits generally. They're set pieces. In some ways, members of Congress may be reluctant to be more aggressive against him, Democrats who are really worried about it, whether he can do another 4 years. Maybe more reluctant to do it while foreign leaders are in Washington.
I think that's right. It really is a tale of two presidents, this summit. One, the current president, and the other, the former president. And I've attended these summits. I've briefed the heads of state and government on many occasions as Supreme Allied Commander. There's a public piece of this, and I think our president, our current president, will stand up very well there. There is a second NATO conference that always goes on. It's the quiet conversations, the bilateral meetings, literally the chat over a cocktail. That conversation will include former President Trump and concerns about could he pull out of the alliance? Could he weaken the alliance? Could he capitulate on certain things to a President Putin? I think you're exactly right. I've heard the same phrase, Trump-proofing the alliance. And I'll close with this. Part of that conversation will include raising the level of defense spending from its current goal of 2%, which now 2/3 of the nations are meeting. Should that be moved on to a stretch goal of 2.5%? I assure you the Europeans are having that conversation as well.
Indeed. We're going to have to leave it there, Michael and Admiral. I hope we can talk throughout the week, because this is a big deal. As Joe Biden would say, I'm cleaning that up a little bit. And he's got to perform. And he has to perform after 8 p.m., which is something that he brought up, last week. He's got to start going to those dinners where those conversations are held. Admiral James Stavridis, Michael Crowley, thanks to both of you.